Hi guys, it's Cornish kayak angler here from Kayak Fishing.blog. In my last video we looked at a very simple and basic anchoring system you can set up on a fishing kayak, which involved the use of an anchor along with an anchor reel full of anchor line. Very easy to use, easy to set up on a kayak. However, it wasn't a quick release system, so you couldn't quickly disengage from the anchor and then return to it at a later time. Now in today's video we're going to look at a true quick release anchoring system and how to set that up on a fishing kayak. And a quick release system involves the use of a pickup buoy. Now in essence we anchor the buoy and then tether off the kayak to the buoy, and this buoy allows you to float your anchor system. You can disengage from it, you can release from the anchor instantly and then return to the buoy when it's safe to do so or at a time when you're ready to do so. Now this has obvious advantages for safety. Say there's a big boat steaming towards you, you need to get out of the way quickly because he hasn't seen you. There might be a big wave coming which is going to risk capsizing you. You need to move quickly. The quick release system allows you to instantly disengage from the anchor, get out the way to safety and return when it's safe to do so. It's also really useful for fishing as well. You might be lucky enough to hook a big fish which is going to run off into the distance, tow you around for a bit. You can disengage from the anchor and allow that fish to move you around. It might just be a friend who's caught a good fish and needs a photo. You can again disconnect from your anchor, go off to help your friend and return when ready to do so. So we're going to have a look at the quick release setup today. It's a great system, really good if you're new to kayak fishing or new to anchoring a kayak. It gives a lot of confidence in anchoring because you can quickly release from the anchor should anything be feeling wrong or not going quite right and you're at risk of maybe turning over or getting tangled up. Quickly release from your anchor, get back to it when it's safe to do so and start the process again. So we're going to have a look at how to put all that together today, and there's a few components required. You're going to need that buoy, you're also going to need an anchor reel full of anchor line and a length of floating rope, and this system will be used in conjunction with an Anchor Trolley kit. And I've spoken about the Anchor Trolley kit in a previous video. It might be worth checking that out because we're going to need one of those to set up the quick release anchor system. So let's start by having a look at the components for this system and how to put it all together into a quick release anchor setup. The first thing you're going to need is an anchor. Now I've spoken about anchors in great detail in previous video. It might be worth checking that out, but I'll quickly run through two of the anchors I use with this setup. This one here is a 1.5 kilo folding grapnel anchor, and it's used in conjunction with about 1 metre to 1.5 metres of 6mm short link galvanised chain. Now the chain adds weight to the system and it helps the anchor hold bottom, grab onto the bottom better for a more effective anchor. This is set up as an anti-snag system with a cable tie weak link. The chain's attached to the bottom of the anchor with a D shackle, runs up the shaft of the anchor to the top eye where the chain is attached via a small cable tie. This is a weak link which allows you to snap out of the anchor and pull an anchor out backwards from a snag. That setup has been discussed in a previous video. Might be worth checking that out if you want to set up an anti-snag system with the chain. But this anchor I use for anchoring on rough ground, hard ground, mixed ground. Can be used on clean ground in calm conditions, so it's a good all-round anchor for that. And another anchor I use particularly for fishing on clean ground, so sand, mud, gravel, shingle, is the Bruce anchor. This one here. This is used with a slightly longer length of chain, about 1.5 metres to 2 metres of that 6mm short link chain. And it's set up with, again, as a quick, an anti-snag system with a cable tie weak link at the top eye of the anchor. On this anchor I use a length of lightweight cord along the top shaft of the anchor so that all the weight's off the nose of the anchor. It causes this anchor to dig in better, and also with no weight on the top of the anchor there's no risk of it falling upside down with this small lightweight Bruce anchor. It's a 1 kilo anchor. Again, fully discussed in a previous video. Check that out if you want more details on how to set that up. But yeah, 2 anchors there to use with this system. Now you're also going to need some anchor line, and this would be stored on an anchor reel. There's a couple of anchor reels here, for example, a smaller one and a larger one. This larger one's the more popular one. This is made by Beaver. It's what we call their Osprey dive reel. Works great as an anchor reel to hold all your anchor line. It's got a push button, non-return, anti-reverse ratchet on it. Just push the button and it allows the line to fall off the reel, unwind from the reel. It's all good for saltwater use. It's made for divers, so everything's 316 stainless or plastic on there. It's loaded up with 2mm multi-filament polypropylene anchor line. And to the end I've just got a small carabiner clip. This makes it really easy to clip on and off the chain of the anchor system. So I'm going to be using one of those. Also the Pick-Up Buoy. Now this buoy, it's about the size of a standard football, which means it's got plenty enough volume to hold the anchor setup floating in the water. I'll show you that as I set it up on the kayak, why that's needed. But it's got a good sized grab handle on top. It's high visibility, that's important too. You're going to want to be able to see where your buoy is to pick it back up again if you have to quick release from your setup. This buoy available from Cornwall Canoes. They sell this one in the UK, but marine chandlery shops will stock Pick-Up buoys. They're a popular marine item for boating as well. So Pick-Up buoy, we're going to need one of those. And also a length of floating rope. Now this is an 8mm multi-filament polypropylene cord, high visibility safety rope. It's yellow and red there, and I've got about 5 meters of that, so that's 8mm cord. You can use 10mm if you want, but 8mm is fine. So next I'm going to show you how to put those components together to set up the quick release system. Okay, the first step to setting up the quick release anchor system is to tie the end of the floating rope to the anchor reel. Now to do this, I just take one corner of the handle, and it doesn't matter too much which knot you use as long as it's well secure on, but I use the scaffold knot. It's the same knot I use for my Anchor Trolleys, and I have put a video together on exactly how to tie that. I'll try and show you here as well. Essentially you pull plenty of excess cord out, run your finger along the main rope and take the tag end, and what you do is you wrap it around both the main rope and your finger in loose coils, maybe 3 times, but working down towards the anchor reel like so. Loose coils so that you can then slip your finger out from those coils, and you can see there those coils there around the main cord. Then you simply take the tag end, poke it up through the middle of those coils, out the other side, and then just pull it all down, tighten it down, and it should slip down and tighten against that handle on the anchor reel like so. Super strong knot. That's not going to be going anywhere. And just to clean it up, we can trim the tag end down. Take a lighter to melt the frayed end so it doesn't go fraying any further. And if you want to make it a super strong knot, you can just lightly melt both sides of the cord, the main cord and the tag end, pinch them together, and it welds the rope together. I'll just do this now. It'll take a few seconds to heat the rope up. This is a plastic rope. Be careful because it will get very hot as you're melting it. You just got to heat up until it gets just tacky and then pinch it together. That's enough to bond the ropes together, and it won't slip then at all. It's solid. So now that the rope's attached to the reel, it just leaves us to attach the buoy to the rope. Now to do this, we want the buoy to sit fairly close to the reel, so maybe a foot or so away. I take the other end of the rope, pass it through the hole in the bottom of the anchor buoy, pull all the slack through, get it to the position where you want it. We're going to say roughly there. Then again, loop it back through. But as you do so, you need to pass it through itself as well to effectively trap the buoy in what would be an overhand knot. So just do that a few times so that it's not going to go slipping anywhere. 2 or 3 times. As many times as you can fit the rope through the eye in the anchor buoy there. Just pass it through itself a few times. What that does is it ensures that anchor buoy cannot slip on that rope now. You can see that it's well attached, it's got several loops around it. Can't pull that so it will slip now, that's rock solid. And that's what we need. If it slips, it's no good, it's got to be solid on there. So as long as it's got a few good knots around it to hold it well, it will be fine. So now all that leaves is to attach the anchor to the reel. As I said, to the anchor line that comes on this reel, it's a 2mm mouse line or multi-filament polypropylene line. I've just tied a cheap, inexpensive zinc-plated carabiner. It doesn't have to be a stainless carabiner, because if worse comes to worse and you lose your anchor setup, then you're not costing you a lot in stainless carabiners. But yeah, take that and clip it on to your anchor chain. And that completes the main setup for the quick release system. So you've got your anchor attached to your anchor reel or a carabiner, with the floating rope tied off to the corner of the anchor reel, your buoy trapped on the, or knotted onto the floating rope so it cannot slip, and then that'll leave you about 4 meters of floating rope past the buoy as well. So that's how we assemble the quick release setup. Now I'll show you how to use it in conjunction with the anchor trolley on my fishing kayak. In order to use the quick release anchoring system on your kayak will need to have an anchor trolley fitted. Now, I've spoken in detail about setting up an anchor trolley in a previous video, but my kayak here, the Hobie Outback 2019 model, it has a full length anchor trolley fitted, running from the very bow here all the way back to the very stern, with a zigzag cleat fitted just back from the seat. So your kayak will need to have an anchor trolley system and a zigzag cleat fitted. And here is the quick release system set up and ready to use. So just make sure you've got everything connected. The anchor reel is well connected to the anchor or the anchor chain. The anchor's clipped on. The buoy's all ready and all your floating ropes ready and not tangled, ready to use. So the next step is to deploy the anchor, and I will show you that in a few steps. The next step is to clip the floating rope into your anchor trolley. So this might be on the carabiner, or if you're using a ring, it needs to be passed through the ring. But we take the tag end, pull some excess, put the excess in the cockpit of the kayak, keep that in the cockpit of the kayak with you, and clip that into the anchor trolley like so. So you've got the end facing the cockpit with the tag end running into the cockpit, and the other end, which is going to be running back towards the kayak, which is attached to the buoy. Now that's in the cockpit at the moment, nothing's in the water at the moment, but once that's in like so, we can shuttle the anchor trolley all the way to the back of the kayak until it hits the very back of the kayak. That's as far as it can go. So once that's up there as far as it can go, we then come to attaching the ropes to the cleat before we put anything in the water. Okay, so at the moment we have the floating rope running through the carabiner of the anchor trolley, which has been shuttled right to the stern, and we've got the tag end here, the loose tag end beside the seat or somewhere near the seat in the cockpit with you. Same with the anchor setup, nothing's in the water yet, so before we can put anything in the water, we just need to lock off the anchor trolley line and the floating rope to the zigzag cleat. So to do this, firstly attach the anchor trolley cord to the zigzag cleat. So I'll just do this here. So you zigzag it through the teeth of the cleat. That carabiner now is locked in position at the stern of the kayak. It can't move from that position. That just leaves us to attach the floating rope of the anchor setup to the cleat. So we take the loose tag end, not the bit that's running to the buoy, the looser tag end, and we zigzag that through the opposite sort of zigzag shape to the anchor trolley so it engages with the empty teeth of the cleat like so, and lock that into place. So that's now solid, nothing's going to move, nothing can slip, and we've got the loose tag end still running into the cockpit. So now, with it set up like so, we are now ready to deploy the anchor and the reel in the buoy, and I'll show you that next. The next step is to place the anchor into the water and lower the anchor to the bottom. So off the dive reel, just press the button here to release the ratchet, and that will allow the anchor to fall to the bottom. And you let that run all the way to the bottom, and then you need to let out some excess cord. Now you need to let out excess cord to ensure that you've got a sort of angle between the back of the kayak and the bottom, so that the anchor will grip the bottom correctly. Now in calmish conditions, you can usually get away with about 1.5 to 4 times the depth you're in. So say if you're in 10 meters depth, you might need maybe to let out 15 to 30 or 40 meters of cord, anchor line, to create that nice angle with the bottom to allow the anchor to dig in the bottom correctly so it will hold you well at anchor. Now as the conditions become more challenging or extreme, you will need to let out more anchor line to create a shallower angle so that your anchor will grip the bottom well. So it might be big swell or a particularly fast running tide, really choppy rough waves. You might need to let out maybe 5 or 6 or more times as much as the depth you're in. So if you're in 10 meters of water, it might be 50 or 60 or more meters of line you need to let out to create that nice really shallow angle with the bottom so that your anchor will grip correctly and hold you well in those conditions. So make sure you let out enough anchor line and be confident you're holding steady before you stop releasing line. Now as you stop releasing line, you effectively become an anchor. So the kayak becomes anchored. Now you're in a position now to throw both the reel and the buoy into the water. And as you do that, the kayak will run down tide, the buoy and the reel will float to the back of the kayak and will sit off the back of the kayak, and you'll hold at anchor, and I'll show you how that will look now. Okay, so you've lowered the anchor to the bottom, let out plenty of anchor line so that you'll hold steady at anchor, and you've thrown the anchor reel and the buoy into the water. The kayaks run down tide or downwind of your anchoring position, and your setup will now look something like this. I mean, it's not perfect, so not on the water, but this is an example of what it will look like. So you've got your loose piece of floating rope kept in the cockpit with you, usually beside the seat, so it's nice and easy to get hold of when you need it. The floating rope running through the zigzag cleat, back through the carabiner or ring on your anchor trolley set at the very stern of the kayak, and then the buoy will be sitting somewhere off the back of the kayak, maybe a metre or a couple of metres off the stern of the kayak, with the reel floating below it, held suspended in the water below the buoy. And then your anchor line running down to the anchor on the bottom, which will obviously be some way back. Obviously not very deep here in this example, but that will be some way back behind the kayak. So that would be set up like so, and in this position you'd be sat at anchor. Now the quick release part. If you needed to quickly release from this setup, say there was some danger, big ship coming, some rough water that you needed to get out of really quickly, it might just be a friend who needs some help on the water and you need to go over to them. All you need to do, grab this floating rope, undo it from the zigzag cleat, let go. Your kayak is no longer held to that anchor system. Now what would happen is the anchor would stay where it is, the buoy would stay floating where it is, the kayak you could paddle, pedal, or just drift off down tide, and as you do so the floating rope would slide through the carabiner unrestricted, Just keep sliding and slide straight out the end. You're now free. You can move off, get out of harm's way, or go and help your friend on the water. And the anchor system is left suspended in the water from the pickup buoy with this length of floating rope, which will be floating on the surface, and that will just stay there until you're ready to go back and pick it up when it's safe to do so, or you're ready to go and get back onto the anchor. So that is the quick release anchoring system there, shown on my Hobie Outback kayak. It works really well. It's really confidence inspiring, especially if you've never anchored before, because you can easily disconnect from that anchor system should you feel something's not right, or you need to reset somehow and go back and anchor again. But makes it very easy to disconnect so that you can go and pick that buoy up and pull in your anchor when ready to do so. Whilst the quick release anchoring system is great for being able to instantly release from your anchor setup, things become a little more complex when it comes to hauling the anchor in. There's just a couple more steps involved which you wouldn't have to do in something like the simple anchoring setup I showed in my previous video. But basically you're going to have to pull your anchor buoy back to the kayak. So you're going to have to release your floating rope, release your anchor trolley from the cleat, pull it all back, pull the buoy and the reel onto the kayak. Now for a moment in time you're going to have the anchor trolley at the midship position, which is not the best when you're anchored because you can turn side on into the conditions, which isn't the safest. Finding calm conditions, but if it's a bit choppy it can get a little bit hairy. But what you're going to have to perform is a quick switch over from the floating rope in the carabiner to the anchor line, so that you can then place that carabiner, quickly shuttle it back to the stern or the bow if you want, lock it back off in position and haul your anchor line in, so that as you're pulling line in under tension, your kayak's running backwards or forwards into the condition to provide stability as you're hauling that anchor. And that is important. You don't want to go hauling side on into the conditions because you can end up tipping your kayak. It can become unstable. But I'll just show you now how I would quickly switch that over and begin to haul the anchor. Okay, so I've disconnected the floating rope from the cleat, I've disconnected the anchor trolley from the cleat, shuttled the anchor trolley back to the centre position here so I can grab this buoy out of the water and pull on the reel. Now the trick is, as soon as you get hold of the reel, release line, let loads of slack out, so that what this gives you is some time to switch the cord in the carabiner, so we can unclip the floating rope and quickly clip in the anchor line like so. And with that clipped in, you can then quickly allow the anchor trolley to shuttle to the stern of the kayak, lock the anchor trolley into the cleat, and then you can begin hauling your anchor and start pulling that anchor back into the kayak. And as you do so, because it'll be under tension, you're riding the kayak into the conditions which will provide stability as you do so. So yeah, you just pull the kayak back to the kayak, and then you can, once you know it's back at the kayak, you can bring that here, and then your setup's on board. When it comes to hauling your anchor line, it's usually best to pull the anchor line in by hand. With these small reels, it's very difficult to wind the line directly onto the reel with the weight of the anchor. So usually it's best to haul in by hand, as I just showed in that last clip. Now, if you're in particularly deep water, you'll have a lot of excess line to deal with, and you don't necessarily want to pull it all onto the kayak because it's just going to make a mess and it'll become difficult to untangle. So there's a couple of ways to stop all the tangling of the line. Most common way is to, as you're pulling the anchor line in onto the kayak, is to chuck the slack line out over the other side of the kayak, the opposite side, because that's usually got water running down tide. It will take the line away from the kayak and stop it all getting tangled up on the kayak. So you can pull the line in, chuck it all over the other side of the kayak until your kayaks arrive back, your anchors arrive back on the kayak. You can then unclip your anchor from the from the reel, and then quickly winding all the slack cord back onto your reel. And you can do it quickly because there's no tension on the system. So that's the main way to do it. But you can, if you're in particularly deep water, do it in several steps where you hand haul, a few tens of meters of line. And then if you want, you can cleat off the anchor line with the anchor still in the water, wind on what you've pulled in, and then uncleat the rope, pull in some more, and again repeat until you've got the anchor back at the kayak. So that's the most common way of pulling the anchor line and hauling the anchor back onto the kayak, by hand hauling the line. So but once it's all back on the kayak, it'll look like so, and it's all set up ready to use again. If you're based in the UK, you can get hold of quick release kayak anchoring kits from Cornwall Canoes. They sell a complete kit just like this, and all the components to create a kit just like this, as well as anchor trolleys. So if you want to set up a quick release kayak anchoring setup on your kayak, get in touch with Cornwall Canoes and they'll put you straight with everything you need for your kayak. If you're based outside of the UK, then get along to a marine chandlery shop or a dive centre or kayak store, as they should have all the components you need to set up this kit. Okay, so that covers the quick release kayak anchoring setup. Simple to make from the anchor, a dive reel or anchor reel loaded with anchor line, a floating pickup buoy, and a length of floating rope. And it's a great system that allows you to instantly disengage or disconnect from your anchor should you need to. And that could be quite useful for safety reasons and for some fishing situations as well. As with any anchoring setup, it's important to practice anchoring in shallows before you go out of your depth into more challenging conditions. So take this setup into the shallows, use it in conjunction with an anchor trolley kit on your kayak. Practice the whole scenario of deploying the anchor, setting the anchor down, locking the lines into the cleats, and then again hauling the anchor as well, so that you know you're confident in the process before you go putting it into sort of real life situations. And it might look slightly complex in the steps I showed today in the video, but in practice and with practice, it's quite simple and quite quick to do. Once you know how to do it, it's just simple, and every time you will get it right. And with practice, you'll greatly reduce the risk of any problems occurring during the anchoring process. But the beauty of the quick release system is, should anything be going wrong, you can quickly let go of the whole system and it will all be left floating off the pickup buoy, so you can return to it when it's safe to do so. So plenty more information on kayak anchoring on my website, www.kayakfishing.blog. And for plenty more kayak fishing videos, hit subscribe. So I hope that helps with you anchoring your fishing kayak. And if you've got any questions regarding the setup, feel free to ask below in the comments. Tight lines, and thanks for watching.